Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ameer Sherif. Just a quick question to start. How many people here don't speak Arabic? Okay, so don't speak Arabic. Okay, so I'll mix some, mostly English, some Arabic. The title of my topic is a bit different than the one in the schedule. I decided that this would be more interesting. I am CEO and co-founder of a company called WUZZUF. It's an online recruitment platform. We've been operating for 5 years, and we connect people with jobs in Egypt. This is our homepage, website. How many of you heard about WUZZUF before? Great. The reason I'm here is mainly to talk, based on this. This is an article which appeared on TechCrunch like 2 months ago. How many of you heard about TechCrunch or know TechCrunch? So TechCrunch is the #1 online news site for tech news, like CNN, but for tech globally. And this was the announcement of our most recent fundraising round. We got some funding from European investors. And I'm quickly going to tell you a very quick story of how we started almost 5 years or more ago until this moment. And it wasn't as easy as it may sound. We started off with the belief that we can have companies here in Egypt which are, in the internet space that are very successful. We don't need to be in Silicon Valley or other places in the world. We, as Egyptians here, based in Egypt, we can have huge successes while serving, and working in Egypt. So that's why we started like 5 years ago. And so quickly, I'll go very quickly through our story from since we started till now, and how we managed to eventually get funding from Silicon Valley, where all the major tech companies are located, and also from investors in Europe and other places. So in total, we've raised almost $2 million in investment. Most of it is from global investors in Silicon Valley and Europe, and only 10% almost from Egypt. And even we weren't actually able to get funding from Egypt or the region as we'd liked. However, when you do something that has scale and that's of high quality, it turns out you can get funding from global investors more than you can get from local and regional investors. We started, as I said, 5 years ago. It took us 5 years to make this major funding. We spent like the past couple of years trying to get investment, and it was very difficult. So usually in Silicon Valley, this is what they call Series A investment. It takes usually like 1-2 years maximum. Here it takes much more. It's very important that when you see the big startups, Facebook, Google, Apple, all these startups, many of them, started, even a couple of, like Uber started only a couple of years ago. Now Uber is everywhere, for example. But here in Egypt, usually it takes much more effort, much more time. And in Silicon Valley itself, out of every 10 startups, maybe 1 really makes it big, 2, survive, and the rest usually fail. That's in Silicon Valley. In Egypt, it's much more difficult. So, but still, there is huge potential and huge opportunities and challenges that if we focus on, we can solve and build great businesses in Egypt and maybe global. Now we have almost 70 full-time employees working at the company. And the most important achievement we have so far is that we helped more than 50,000 people in Egypt get hired at more than 5,000 companies. That's 50,000 people getting hired in Egypt. That's more than any other private entity in Egypt. So that's actually our biggest achievement. It's not the fundraising or the other things, because these are just one part of the business. It's not the the most important thing of a business. So very quickly, our early years, our first 3 years, I started off, I wanted to build a business. I saw these founders in Silicon Valley, very young, 20s, early 20s, and they had this list of top 20 millionaires under 20. Okay, so they have this list in the US of people under 20 years who made multiple businesses and made millions. So why don't we have such, successes here? And I started applying to different business plan competitions with different ideas, with different people, until in 2009 we got, won a business plan competition. I got incubated in ITIDA, which is government incubation program in Cairo. And we started in 2010 working on the program, on development, and took us too much to launch, which is first, mistake for people starting off first time. And we launched our first, website first time in January 2011, which is 1 week before the revolution. So it was a very, bad timing. And the internet, cut off for a couple of weeks, as you remember. We stayed for a couple of months, like 6 months, companies weren't hiring, so that's another problem. And we were running out of cash. We had to do some services, build custom software for companies, for enterprises to get some cash. We started borrowing money from friends and family, and we tried everything to, keep the business running. And in 2012, we managed to get, some very small investments locally, and managed to relaunch the website, WUZZUF. And we started seeing some traction, which is, some users, some companies, but still it was very, very small amounts, and the revenue wasn't even enough. And mid-2012, we were deciding to shut down the company. This was very difficult. The revenues weren't, sufficient for the expenses we were spending. And we, people in the team were leaving. My co-founder actually left, and I started looking for jobs in other places, started interviewing in other places, but then things started to pick off. And regarding this, like, the main advice I would give is, if you strongly believe in your, in your idea, in whatever project you're working on, if you keep working on it enough, just when you're almost desperate, if you're putting the right amount of effort, things will work out at the end. And during all this time, we tried to fundraise to grow the business, and I've met almost more than 100 investors in Egypt and the region. I flew to events all over, pitching investors, trying to get investment for our company, and most of them, I came back with rejections. Nobody nobody believed that, we can grow the business. So there are like 3 steps which I believe any, at least internet business in Egypt, maybe other technology companies as well, can take step by step to, reach the global potential possible, even if they're operating in Egypt. So the first one is, getting, angel investors and mentors, people who are more experienced with relevant domain experience in what you're doing. If you're doing hardware, you need to find people in hardware who can advise you. If you're doing software, there's so many different models like marketplaces and SaaS. You have to decide on how many of you are working in a startup or planning to start their own, technology company someday? Okay, so not many, but still this applies to if you're, planning on launching any kind of business or project, even within a company. So the first step was getting advisors and angel investors, what they call. So these are personal people who have money and would be interested to invest with you if you have an idea, and they believe in you and the idea. And I'll go through this quickly. The next step we did was, after you get some advice, because whatever you do, you always need people with more experience who can advise you. the next step we did is that we got some two angel investors in Egypt who were willing to put some very small amounts of cash with us. And then we still wanted more money to invest in the business and grow it further. So the past couple of years in Egypt were very difficult to fundraise. So I started wondering, what if we start looking for investments elsewhere, not only the region, but globally. I found out that there are so many startup, what they call startup accelerators in the US and in Europe, where they accept applications from companies all over the world who are working on specific projects and would like to, with global potential. And we actually applied to an accelerator program called 500 Startups in Silicon Valley. And we became the first startup from Egypt to join this program. Still, also, the application program wasn't very easy. We got rejected first, and then we tried again, but then it worked. And then when we went to Silicon Valley, of course, this is the other things regarding global support is that given the internet right now, I believe that almost 99% of any technical knowledge you need to grow your business or implement your idea is available on the internet. In blogs, on other websites, everything is there. So information is available globally. As I mentioned, there are so many accelerators, programs where anyone all over the world can apply and get accepted and go to Silicon Valley and go to the US and Europe if they're focusing on a specific topic or project. And then when we went to, this is the one in black, this is 500 Startups. So they are the most active venture capital investor in the world. They invested in more than 1,000 startups, technology companies all over the world. And thankfully, when we became the first in Egypt, we opened the door for other companies from Egypt to also join. And then there's always the decision of when someone starts a business or internet company is whether to focus on the local market in Egypt or focus globally. Many people say just go for global or go for regional market to Saudi Arabia or Emirates, but there is, of course, it depends on your business. If you're doing, for example, a mobile app, it might be better to have a global audience, and then you have to figure out where global investors will be interested in this idea to fund it. But still, Egypt is, a huge market, and most of the biggest internet companies in the region, their main focus right now is Egypt. If you look at Souk.com, Jumia, Dubizzle, these types of companies, these are the biggest funded companies in the region. Their biggest growth right now is in Egypt. So still there is a huge potential in Egypt. So as I said, you should, based on whatever you decide on doing as a company, internet company or technology company, you can focus on the local market in Egypt or global, but still we have a huge population. Most people don't see it as an opportunity and see most of the Gulf markets as a bigger opportunity because they're bigger spenders, but still the number of people we have we have a lot of issues in Egypt, like traffic, health, education. These are all challenges. And challenges in the end are opportunities that can be improved upon. Regarding internet, for those who are interested in internet, the number of internet users in Egypt doubled in the past 5 years. This is extremely fast growth. In in developed markets like the US, the growth in the past 5 years has been extremely much smaller. And even mobile penetration in Egypt is huge also. It's almost doubled in the past year. As I mentioned, there are so many challenges and hence opportunities. Of course, these are, I already gave a shorter version of this talk earlier today at the other venue. these are more detailed, advices for people who are willing to, start their own startups or technology companies. And I'll be available if anybody is interested to ask more on how to, to grow their startup or even start a new one. And I hope we can have more successful, startups, technology companies from Egypt who can grow global or even, make a huge impact while staying here in Egypt. Thank you.